Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchiara, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome in, Joe Cucchiara, Real Estate Radio Live. We're back with you, and I got a fun show in store for you today. It's been a couple of weeks now. We got Jack Russo connected again, as we did a couple of weeks ago in Florida. And what I did is I take a couple of pictures of them, because some of this stuff we're not doing live on Facebook. We're having some connector problems. But so if it doesn't, what I did, Jack, is I took a picture of you, and I'll include it in the podcast, maybe as a snapshot here too.
Hey, look, you know that your mother is at the end of life when she gifts you all of her wigs and says, right, you should wear them because the UV rays here in Florida will give you skin cancer. And I started trying them on. It turns out that my head is exactly the same size as her head. And so I started to wear a hat with them and thought, maybe there is something to be said for getting a full head of hair back. And of course, my wife, the lovely Dr. Lee Suter Russo, is like, you look so bad, take that off. That's awful. And most of the people here, as I said in a previous show, there's 4 types of billboards that you see here. Billboard number 1 is cosmetic surgery. Okay. That's the most billboards. Right. Billboard number 2 is personal injury lawyers.
All right.
Billboard number 3 is pawn shops. And billboard number 4 is medical marijuana.
Wow. Okay.
And the medical marijuana is becoming a big deal here in Florida. As people get older, they don't want to take these pills anymore. They don't want to take the Oxycontins. But man, are they smoking dope out here? I mean, I have to tell you, it's even in the air. I mean, I think it's probably not as bad as San Francisco, but it's definitely growing.
It's the solution. So our topic today is why are the rich leaving California, actually, and why, not only why they're leaving, but what's the reason and how come. So we're going to discuss a little bit of that. So it could be, one of the interesting things about our show now, which is kind of timing-wise, no one would ever know, but Jack's been in Florida now for 2 months almost, or how long?
It feels like 6 months. It feels like I've been under house arrest for like 6 months, but I want to say it's probably going on 4 months.
Wow.
Like literally, it's been quite a while, because it happened before the fires happened, and it happened after COVID. And I always think of COVID as March 15, but I think it's more like March 11, and may even go back to February. Mm-hmm. But I started getting the calls about my brother was in the hospital and my mother was in the hospital at the same time. So the house was empty, and my mother was freaking out about her house being empty. And I, of course, we're in a different world where we have cameras and security systems, so we don't think of an empty house as a big deal. But the old Italian thing is you never left your house empty.
Right.
Like that was you found someone to house sit, because what if the water broke or something?
Right.
What if something bad happened?
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, you got to help me deal with this house. It's empty. I don't know what to do. Like the world is coming to an end. By the way, they get so many storms here in the Land O'Lakes, which is the Tampa region, literally a half hour from the Tampa International Airport. They get so many storms, and the storms are so significant, the electricity goes out.
Mm.
They got a backup generator. My brother, who was here, I like to say my mother was supporting my brother, but he likes to say he was supporting my mother. I think maybe they were sort of supporting each other. But he got a backup generator.
Wow.
And he got the backup generator installed with a direct gas line to the direct natural gas that comes in the house. That natural gas does not get cut off. So that backup generator just comes on with no diesel delivery. In California, it's more like diesel.
That's good.
It's good. It's like one of the few houses that's got a backup generator. So when the lights go out in the whole neighborhood, this house stays on, and people in the neighborhood are like, wow, what's going on there? Is he special or what?
They're prepared. So it is a good coincidence for our show anyway, because we're talking about why the rich are leaving California and some of the issues around it. So we're going to jump back into that today. And, interesting, Jack spending almost 2+ months, actually it's more than that, in Florida.
Right.
You've got some personal perspective now because, I know you, like me, we've been in California for the most part, outside of travel, of course, for 40+ years. And
right.
Sometimes you hear about it, you think about it, you read stories, you see all this stuff, but you really don't know until you go visit and spend a significant amount of time in a place outside of
spend a significant amount of time with challenging circumstances, not in the la-di-da, I'm on vacation and the hotel delivers breakfast every morning. Spend a significant amount of time where you're putting the garbage out and you're watching to see how good or bad, in this case very good, the garbage collector is. Like the garbage collector, literally, if the automated machine that brings the can up, if it somehow screws up and garbage goes on the street, he gets out of the truck to pick up the garbage. He doesn't leave it in the street the way I think in some places in California, they'd be like, man, I'm too busy. All that junk is going to be left on the street. Those little tiny quality activities make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it was Steve King who we had on who talked about leaving for Arizona. And he said after 70 years, he left California for Arizona. And he said he didn't mind paying taxes in Arizona because he thought the quality of service in Arizona, in the Phoenix area, was far, far better than the quality of service that he saw in San Jose, or I think he's more south, even further south, Salinas maybe. He was even further south than San Jose.
Yeah, he was in Morgan Hill or Gilroy.
Morgan Hill.
So,
right.
Yeah, the big question is always the same, and I think it'd be interesting to watch it unfold here in the next couple of years, is with these changes, not only the political environment, which, that's a whole different story. I don't know. I'm not sure what's better for the unrest of this economy and California and everything else, whoever wins this election. I'm not sure what direction it's going to go, but no matter what happens, predominantly California, I can't imagine the political environment changing anytime soon, right? Regardless of who's elected, because California is still ran a certain way. I think the mindset is to tax. And I just don't know where the breaking point is. We talked about this before a couple of weeks ago, what they're trying to impose on not only homeowners, but business owners. I don't know what the breaking point is. And of course, now with the fires, we have that issue. On the other side about this, Jack, though, it's right now at the moment as we have this podcast, it is not affecting the housing market. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. The housing market's going berserk.
Yeah, that surprised me because I would think that people would think twice before buying at least an expensive home in the Bay Area because the air quality is not great. People know that the 1% limit on real estate taxes is under some degree of scrutiny. Maybe that's going to change. We know that there's other taxing initiatives out there, at least to approach a higher tax for the wealthy or the super wealthy.
Right.
And I like to say there's an orthogonal aspect of this that people are not putting into perspective. If you're spending most of your time inside on Zoom in an air-conditioned home or air-conditioned whatever, and you're not doing anything in your local community, why are you paying all of those taxes associated with living in that community?
Good point.
Unless you say, well, it's a very limited period of time. But I have to tell you, I actually think this COVID thing is going to become COVID-20, COVID-21, COVID-22. And we're going to be living mostly indoors and mostly in some sheltered way for maybe the next several years. I hate to say it's that bad, even with the vaccine, but my sense from everything I'm reading is even if a vaccine is perfected, it won't get distributed until maybe late 2021. And maybe by 2022, we might start seeing some sense of safety about it. Right now, I think people, even in Florida, which is, a very conservative place, they're all wearing masks and they're all 6 feet apart and they're all pretty respectful, except at the beach. I'd say at the beach, people still operate like nothing's wrong and life is great and you don't need to do anything. And somehow the ocean water will refresh you. Of course, that's not really true. But I do think if your perspective is you're mostly operating out of an indoor terminal, that terminal can be anywhere. So why would it be in a high tax state like California or New York?
Right.
Or a high tax city like New York City? I would think a lot of the people who pay 4 levels of taxes in New York, the federal taxes that we all pay, the state taxes, a county tax, and a city tax in New York City, in Manhattan. Why would you stay in Manhattan?
Yeah, I don't know.
It could be a 60%, 65% tax.
Certainly haven't done any formal surveys, but informally, I talk to a lot of people. I do this podcast. I get a lot of feedback. I read a lot of emails, texts in regards to the real estate market. I can tell you that the two demographics that seem to be really strongly looking to make the move out of California would be, the people a little bit older, the baby boomers and older, right? They've probably created a fair amount of wealth, at least if nothing else, through real estate. A strong time to get out. The other group that I, and only because I see it every day with my daughters who are the millennials, is they're having daily conversations about, I want to go move somewhere else. I don't see staying here in California. And I've never heard more of that in the last 6 or 7 months by the younger generation. And especially to your point, Jack, the fact now is most of these jobs, if you're going to be on Zoom, or companies don't care where you're working as long as you hit your numbers and get your results and get the metrics right. I could see the younger generation really making that exit.
Well, I told you a few months ago, maybe even in the first quarter of this year, I started getting calls from various clients saying, hey, if I move completely out of the U.S., am I subject to taxation? The answer is generally yes. The exception is if you move to Puerto Rico, which is technically outside the continental U.S., but within the ability to keep your passport. So you're still a U.S. resident. You're not really a U.S. citizen. You're really then sort of a citizen of Puerto Rico, the island, which is a possession. You don't pay federal taxes. So for people who really want to make the big jump, we could cover 4 different jumps that people can make, but the really big jump is you jump to Puerto Rico, which of course takes you outside continental United States and to some degree onto an island that has its own set of poverty problems and lots of other things gone wrong, including government that tends to be bloated, although they are putting a lot of e-government to work, and a lot of people that are not considered at the level of intellectual prowess. I know I'll get some pushback from people I know in Puerto Rico, including a few really smart professors that used to teach at Harvard, who have said, man, there's really smart people on this island. You just have to know where to find them. And of course, you are on an island, so that means you're not going to get your Amazon package like in 24 hours. It's going to take a little longer. And you are going to have to deal with, a different mentality about how quickly service gets done, because there tends to be more of a mañana kind of attitude there. And I did investigate, and we have investigated the possibility of even opening an office there, because you could put a lot of back-end services there that are associated with supporting professional people, but where it's located in a lower cost outsourced way without going to Eastern Europe or Russia or any exotic place. And you get these huge tax benefits when you do it. So I think that's one big jump that people can do. And I know people that are doing it. And the thing that stunned me, and here's the punchline, the thing that stunned me is there was a 30-something-year-old guy and wife who are kind of at the beginning of their great career expansion, where they're both executive VPs and making their way with vested stock options and all that jazz. And they said, we're thinking about convincing our respective employers to allow us to do all of our work from Puerto Rico, and we agree to be online 10 to 12 hours a day to make sure that we cover everything that's going on for at least 4 days a week, which if you add those hours up, that becomes more like a 50-hour work week. But their attitude was, if we're not getting any tax as a result, if we're not paying any federal or any state tax, and all we're paying is a 4% Puerto Rico tax, we kind of feel great about even taking a salary cut. And we'll use that card with our boss. And I thought to myself, wow, I mean, who thinks that way? People typically think about, I need to make more money. I need to make more money. I need to make more money. They were going the other way, which is to say, if we get rid of this crazy tax regime, we could actually work in a more efficient way in that country. And they each speak Spanish. And part of their approach was they're going to be spending time with her family in Spain as well. So they feel very confident. They feel very confident that they can pull this off.
Right. So that's the major jump out of the four. So you have the major, which would be really extreme, going to some place like Puerto Rico. Working backwards, what would three be?
Right. So before we get to three, let me say there's a super major jump, which we won't cover, but which we'll identify, which is give up your U.S. citizenship and completely revenue yourself in a tax haven, like the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
And there are people that do that, but you pay an exit tax. You pay an exit tax as though you've died.
What is that exit tax? Do you know?
That exit tax could be as high as 40% of your net worth. But it's calculated based on what would the taxes be if you had died under the estate planning. And right now the estate planning numbers are pretty big. So the odds of the exit tax being really high right now are low, except California is talking about its own separate exit tax. And Palo Alto is talking about an exit tax from Palo Alto for the super wealthy, which people are like shaking their heads like, how many exit taxes will I have to pay? It's like having a toll to get out of Palo Alto, a toll to get out of California, a toll to get out of the United States, and a toll to kind of cross the Atlantic or cross the Pacific, right?
Well, that's interesting. So for all these people you hear talk about, I hear it all the time, Joe, I'm going to move to Mexico. I could get a house on the beach and a maid and a butler service and a cook and all this, and which is very true for cheap. But what they're not understanding maybe is someone like that would have to pay an exit tax.
Right. They've got to be aware that it takes some planning. Yeah. And takes some smart. You can't do this like on a turn of a dime. You've really got to. You really have to do some serious planning around how do you segregate your assets in different ways to assure you don't pop above whatever the magic hurdle is. Right. That's part one. And then part two, which is where it usually breaks down, is how do you feel about shifting all the medical providers, because we're all attached to different professionals, dentists and medical doctors and chiropractors and foot doctors and you name it. We have the best healthcare system. It may be very expensive, but the U.S. clearly is ahead of most other places in the delivery of healthcare. But man, is it expensive. It mostly isn't covered by insurance. I just got a bill, I won't even talk about in detail, from something that occurred. And I was like, how come the medical insurance is not covering this? This is like such standard stuff. And I get zapped with a 5-figure bill. Like, wow, really? For what happened? And I think to myself, that too can be a factor for why you'd move, because you might say California is great on delivery of medical services, but the price of it is really high. So for people doing cosmetic surgery, I think you would never want to do it in California. It's probably the most expensive place in the world to do it. And if you did it in like Mexico or Thailand, it'd probably be like 1/10 of the price. Yeah,
that's a good point. So you got
so you got the super jump.
Yeah.
You got the jump to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Then if we go in the other direction, which is what's the minimal jump, I think the minimal jump is a little bit like what Steve King did, which is you go to an adjoining state or a near adjoining state that's taxable, but at a lower rate. Mm-hmm. And you kind of say to yourself, well, I could still sort of drive into California, or I could still do, you're not in a foreign country, you're fairly close to California. This is like going to Reno. A lot of people go to Reno or Incline Village. Now there, it's not reduced tax, it's just zero state tax.
Right.
But you're in an environment where, at least for my money, unless you're a downhill skier, you're going to have a winter there that you're going to have to deal with. Now, you could live in California for, say, 89 days. Some people like to say 182, but I actually think California starts to get really tough if you spend more than 89 days in California. But remember, if you're traveling the way I am for cases in England or cases in Spain or cases in Greece, and I'm overseas 90 to 120 days out of the year, I'm not in California. during that 90 to 120 days. So you have to think about how much is it costing you to remain those additional incremental days above 89 days in California, right? You have to think at the margin, which is if you're traveling, which as we get older and life is ending, we better get the travel in, because I have to tell you, when you get to be 90, you don't even want to get out of bed.
No.
I mean, my mother was cursing me today. Why? I mean, I can't even tell you the detailed story. It's such a weird story, but she had to go with me somewhere in the car. And she was like, I just don't even do this to go to the hospital. I can't believe it. I can't believe you're forcing me to do this. And it was like a 10-minute drive. And she's like yelling at me during the 10 minutes because she's so uncomfortable in her really expensive Mercedes that I now own. She's really, really, because she's gifted it to me, she's really uncomfortable because it doesn't have all the right pillows around it. Of course it doesn't have pillows.
So is that mostly psychological or physical, or just it's hard for her to handle because of the age?
It's physical. She hurt her back like an idiot. She's smart generally, but her cleaning lady didn't come, so she decided to get on her hands and knees at 90 to scrub her own bathroom floor. I mean, give me a break. At least get a mop to do it, right? Like, you don't bend down, you don't go on your hands and knees. And she literally had to call 911, and they had to pull her out of the bathroom. She was on the floor. She couldn't get up.
Wow. And
then turned out she had sprained her back. And she was in the hospital for 20 days. Wow. And here's the good news. No hospital bill, Joe. All covered. All covered by her health plan. I was shocked. I said in California, that would have been a $25,000 bill. Easy. Wow. Even with health coverage, it would have been an add-on bill.
Boy.
So amazing. Florida's got a better health care system, in my opinion. Maybe the delivery of service is not as good. I think it's actually pretty good, relatively speaking. But the cost is way lower. So you got to balance that. I mean, that's one of 7 different factors you balance.
So what are the states that don't have state tax? You have Texas, Nevada, Florida. Is that right? Florida doesn't.
Texas, Nevada, Florida, Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah, Tennessee is one. I think Kansas has a relatively low state tax. I mean, there's lists of these different places. I think, for example, Delaware has no, because it's got a big sort of corporate system of taxation. A lot of Delaware corporations pay all these taxes and franchise fees and whatnot. It's a small state. It's where Joe Biden came from. He was the senator from Delaware. I mean, it's like a tiny, tiny state, but it's got a ginormous computer system that runs most of these Delaware filings. So to go back to the sort of the hierarchy, there's the super leave the entire U.S., give up your citizenship, pay your exit tax. There's leave for Puerto Rico and deal with the vagaries of Puerto Rico, which a lot of people have problems with. Personally, I don't, and that's an experiment I'm going to do next if I can get my wife to buy into it. She's like, I don't know if I'm ready to learn Spanish. She's sort of not totally game. Then there's the go to a place that is no tax, so like Florida would be a good example. But a lot of people say, well, if you come to Florida, you might as well come to Puerto Rico. You're already pretty far south. You're already pretty far east, right? And so that becomes an interesting question, particularly if you're in southern Florida, like Miami or the Florida Keys. I mean, you're basically really very far south at that point.
Right.
So then you could go to a place like Texas, which is in the middle of the country, and take the view. You can go either east or west. And it's a big hub for American Airlines if you don't mind being on an airliner, which a lot of people don't want to fly anymore. My mother would never get on a flight today. She would be like, are you crazy? I'm not going to be in that COVID chamber. I'm not going to get all those germs or all of those bacteria or all of those viruses on me. Or you could do the adjoining state thing, which is like Nevada or Arizona or New Mexico is even another place that is now getting a certain degree of cachet to it. But there are definitely people leaving California because they think the air quality is poor, the delivery of service is poor, and the taxation is very high, and the degree of poverty seems to be increasing, and the degree of crime seems to be increasing as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that if nothing else, this, I would say the combination of COVID, the election, the taxation, all these different things that really have, really played a big part in people talking and thinking and considering these types of things I can't remember ever a time in my life that there's been this much kind of, people just standing up talking, wondering what my next move is going to be. I don't know about you. It's interesting. It'll be interesting how it plays out. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, we're pretty resilient. So I'm just wondering, 6 months from now, a year from now, when there's a vaccine, is there a lot of, do we look back and go, oh my God, look at the overreaction? Or do we look back and say, wow, there were some significant changes because of COVID-19 and some of these other election issues?
Well, I'll frame it this way, this is something my mom picked up on, which I didn't. There's a big controversy about this Woodward book, which is the tell-all about Trump. Right. This book that's called Rage. It just came out. I just ordered my copy. Hopefully I'll get through it this weekend and we could even do a show on it. But my mother was listening to the audio tapes, and they've been playing like 7x24 on the channels that she watches, which she's always watching TV. I mean, this could be a funny stand-up comedy skit, because she said, I don't understand how Donald Trump could be so stupid as to let himself be recorded, and he's using the F word and he's swearing, and it really doesn't look very presidential. And it's very clear that Woodward is pushing him, and he's making stupider and stupider statements. And somewhere in this, there's a part of the recording where Woodward says to Trump, well, this is going to be a really tough book for you. When you read it, you're going to be a little upset. Like, I just want to get you ready that I'm really going to scorch you here. And Trump says something like, well, okay, well, maybe the next book will be better. And my mother picked up on that. I have to say, we have to find that tape and play it at some point. My mother said Trump made a deal with Woodward that he's going to let Woodward scorch him. But when all of history is done, this relates to your question, when all the dust settles, Woodward's going to do a book that says, Trump caused people to rethink politics. Trump caused people to rethink how important it is to vote. Trump caused people to realize that a vote makes a difference. Trump caused people to realize there's a lot of fat in government. Trump caused people to realize that DC is a swamp. I mean, it is a swamp.
It is a swamp. I don't think anybody can argue with that. So, that's interesting. We won't go into this politically. We just have a couple minutes left, but there is a large group, and there's a segment, or I don't even know, but that take the view and would say, they shake their head and they laugh because they say Trump, I don't know if you would say he's smarter than most people think. I don't think that's the right phraseology. I would say that he's either a marketing genius, or he knows how to get people under people's skin, or he really knows, he taps into something, I guess is my point. You could say what you want about, and again, this is not taking one side or another, but if you're an objective and you're looking at him, you think to yourself, how does a guy like that become the president? And how does a guy like that arguably pass a lot of policies, get a lot of things done, whether you like him or not, but be so obnoxious and arrogant and egotistical? And you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's three parts to the answer. Part one is he believes any publicity is good publicity.
Okay, yeah.
And that's part one. Part two, he believes that his authenticity, regardless of the content, it's really him. It's not scripted. He's going to do whatever comes to his head. He thinks that plays really well with his base.
Okay.
The 30 to 35% of Americans would just say, I hate the scripted Biden kind of teleprompting. I hate Bloomberg's teleprompting. I hate even Obama, who did it really well. He used a teleprompter, but he did it really well. You couldn't tell he was doing it. I just hate that because it's just a bunch of elitists writing a bunch of bullshit that is not really what this politician thinks, whereas Trump just says, I'm authentic. And then part three is he's like, I am the best alternative of everything that otherwise is ugly. In other words, I am the best of the worst. It's all bad people. You cannot get anyone that's going to be Jesus Christ superstar in that role. It just is impossible. So recognize that at least I'll be authentic. At least I'll tell you kind of the way I see it. And I think that I will take the lumps with it because that's the authenticity, and you'll see it for what it is. And the base seems to just applaud it. I mean, they just applaud it. Even this latest set of videos and recordings, they're like, yeah, man, he's telling it like it is. And I have to tell the story. So I've actually made about $1 million in real estate here in Tampa.
Really?
In just a few months that I've been here.
No
there
kidding.
are so many properties that you can essentially purchase and flip. There is so much stuff on the market here compared to California that you can do if you're smart. Joe, if you came out here and we spent a week or two, you'd be like, why am I spending time knocking my head in San Jose where it's like going to 2,000 a square foot when I could buy and fix this and flip it and make, $500,000 on a flip? I mean, I have to say, so you have to go in some gentrifying neighborhoods where there's a tough crowd. Like if you want to see some of the stuff that's out there, you have to get your hands dirty. So I do, and I'm going into this really black neighborhood in Tampa. We'll leave out the details about it, but I'm there with an agent, kind of an interesting young woman who's kind of learning the ropes. And she was like, yeah, I'll just let you ask all the questions of these people because, hey, you're the lawyer. You know this stuff, right? So she got a real good education. We should get her on the show at some point because she'd be like, I learned so much in that hour touring these, knockdown properties in this neighborhood. They're basically knockdowns. And this woman, unemployed, black, pregnant, single mom, 4 other kids, is still working while she's like 6 months pregnant, cleaning houses. Wow. That's what she does for a living. I mean, this is America, man. Wow. And she's like talking about, yeah, I pay the rent on time here, and I don't get any service from the landlord, and I understand he's going to sell his house, and I can't afford to buy it. And I said to her at some point, I forget what her first name is, she told me it, but let's call it Nina. I said, so Nina, that's not a real name. Nina, so who are you going to vote for? I'm voting for Donald Trump. I'm voting for Donald Trump. I swear, Joe, I just about fell off my chair. I said, why? I said, she said, he's real. He's real, man. He's real. He's not bullshit. He tells it like it is. I mean, she represents a black voter that is going to vote for Trump. And there are a lot of them. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just telling you they've got opinions, and they're living otherwise in sort of below average premises by various people. Wow. By the way, in this particular case, the owner of the property is Vietnamese. And he's not really taking care of the property. So, in the hierarchy of things, this guy's doing a bunch of stuff to try to make money on property without really doing what you would say is the right thing in terms of fixing the property. But the point I'm making is that in the hierarchy, Trump gets votes from people that you would otherwise think would question whether Trump is the right guy. Yeah,
amazing. Well, we're going to have to cut it off. Jack, it's been good seeing you. I wish you the best with your mom and your brother, and you
got to come out here, Joe. We got to go fishing in the Gulf.
I really should.
We got to come out. We'll rent a boat and do some deep sea fishing. I think it'd be an eye opener. You'd be like, wow. I mean, I'm going to go to an auction tomorrow.
Are you?
I swear, I think I'm going to get a property for like 1/3 of what its real value is. You just have to know how to. You just have to know how to negotiate. I mean, it's amazing.
Well, let us know. Next week when we do the show, give us an update on the real estate out there and some of the transactions that you're working on. Could maybe give some insight as some people not only moving but investing over there.
I think that it is theoretically possible to create a mini version of Silicon Valley. I'll say this and then we'll do a bigger show on this concept. I think that Tampa and the Tampa area is ready for I call it, and this is my trademark term, I'm going to put a little TM after it. I call it T Combinator, T/Combinator, not Y Combinator, T Combinator, meaning Tampa Combinator. And you can get a number of entrepreneurs from really great schools, really great colleges, that want to start businesses, but they need some mentorship.
Yeah.
And although there's a lot of mentors in Silicon Valley, they have not quite hit Florida because a lot of them retire here and they just golf. Whereas I'm not doing that. If I ever retire, it's going to be to help entrepreneurs continue to build businesses. It won't be retirement. It'll be a shift from law to business, more like going from the JD to the MBA, rather than, combination of both that I do now.
Well, we'll get an update from you next week. Let's plan on doing another one next Thursday.
Great. Good seeing you, Joe. Your hair looks great. Who's ever taken care of your hair? I'm very jealous.
I'm cutting my own hair.
I have to say, I'm very, very jealous. It's looking really good.
All right. Well, take care of yourself.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll take care. See you later, Jack.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.